Kia ora, I'm Danielle,
And I'm Jill.
and this is Sincerely the Young Church.
This project was born out of conversations that we find ourselves having with young people and parish leaders all across the Hamilton Diocese.
Our hope is that these conversations can empower you and encourage you to enter into the life of the young church.
So we can journey together deeper into the heart of our Lord.
Welcome.
Sincerely, the Young Church. Hey guys, welcome. Denny, how are you doing?
Welcome back,
It's
everyone.
been a whole week.
What a week.
What a week.
I'm doing well. How are you, Jill?
Good. You just finished placement for nursing. How exciting is it to be done with your first year of nursing school?
It feels really good, really exciting. Yeah. I don't know, uni is sometimes easier, sometimes harder than I expected, but it's been a great experience. Lots of learning in many facets of life, so it's cool.
Contextualization, obviously, Danielle is studying nursing because I just said that.
Yes.
It's a big thing going on in her life.
Yeah, it's great. It is great. Sometimes it's like nice to be a little bit past, like straight out of school and studying, because I feel like I can get, just that little bit more out of it, and maybe it's a little bit easier to balance life with school. So it's cool.
Yes, this time of year is great too because it starts to all slow down, which is wonderful.
Amazing.
It's a wonderful time of the year.
Yeah.
Christmas. We're in Advent.
Yeah.
First week of Advent. How amazing is it? Baby Jesus is coming, guys. Super
So
excited.
I'm so excited. Yeah. How are you, Jill? Are you looking forward to summer? What's on the cards?
Not much, to be honest. Just staying home, cozy.
Mm-hmm.
Quiet Christmas. We always have a quiet Christmas, which is great.
Cool.
It's pretty great.
awesome.
This is exciting. It's like, we're American, so we celebrate Thanksgiving. We had Friendsgiving, which was wonderful. Had a nice feast, and that always feels like it just launches into the Christmas season, which is great.
Yeah.
So, very excited. I'm really excited about our topic today.
What
So
are we
hopefully
talking
you
about?
found the last 2 episodes really great. If you're joining us for the first time, please go check those out. They're available on YouTube, Spotify, all the things.
Definitely.
But today, we're talking and addressing one of my greatest pet peeves in society, not even just a church, society. My biggest pet peeve as a millennial myself is when everybody bunches young people as millennials. Like, the reality is that millennials, some of them are like 40 years old.
Yeah, which is still young, but like not
It is
really
still young.
necessarily what you think of when you think of like
Yeah,
youth.
everybody's like, oh, millennials. And you're like, that person is 15 years old. They are not a millennial. So we're talking a bit about the two generations that fall under, I guess, what we consider young people within the church, which is millennials and Gen Z, or Gen Y, which is millennials, and Gen Z.
So, for those of us who maybe this is new information or we aren't as familiar with the breakdown, can you tell us the age ranges or like cutoffs for
Yeah.
the two different generations?
So millennials are 1981 to 1995.
Yeah.
Gen Z is 1996 to 2012. So actually we have a whole other rising generation, but we won't get into that today.
They're like really young though, right? How
They
old
are.
are they? Like 9?
Ish,
yeah.
9.
Yeah.
I can do maths.
Yeah, okay. So they're
9,
kind of
10,
coming up.
8.
But they're not really like, in the what
Yeah.
we'd consider the
Yeah,
youth
I mean,
yet.
they
They're
are
sort of-
young people in the church, like children in the church, but not
Yeah.
traditionally like young people. So, yes, it's quite a big difference. Like, that's a very big difference because 1981 would be 40 years old.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm closer
Amazing.
to 30 than 40. Just want to make that known. So today we're going to talk about some research. I'm going to get really nerdy.
No, I love it. Go nerdy.
Which is great because we have to be knowledgeable about these things. It can't just be, and we don't want this project to just be our opinion, which is why we did an entire episode last time about the opinions of other people that we seem to share, but it's not an opinion thing. It is it's a
conversation.
study. We can be a student of youth culture.
Yeah,
right?
Definitely.
That was one of the biggest takeaways that I got from studying youth ministry in uni was to be a student, to be a good youth minister, and not just a paid youth minister, a person who works with young people.
Yeah.
is to be a student of youth culture, and that's ever changing, and we kind of have to keep tabs on it. So we're going to talk about a little bit of the similarities, a little bit of the differences, a little bit of the research behind those generations, millennials and Gen Z, within the church, which I think is really valuable.
Cool. So. And I guess also like then those differences and that breakdown is like, what does each generation value, and and how do they bring those values and those things that have shaped them as a generation to the church, and what does that mean for us?
Exactly.
With all these different sort of different values, different importance that we place on different things just because of how we've grown up and the times that we've lived in.
And even like the two of us, right? I'm definitely a millennial.
And 32. I'm a Gen Zer.
She's just at the cusp of Gen Z. But that's okay.
I mean, I feel like I make the cut, so I'll claim it. I feel like I identify.
Claim it, believe it. It's great.
I identify as a Gen Z.
One of the things that we've talked about this before. We were going over our notes at the beginning. We're like, we're not sure if we've talked about that before, but kind of your, I guess, perspective on the attitude towards young people sometimes, and that there's this negative kind of attitude.
Well, I think it sometimes just comes out of, when things are different from, like, someone or something is different from what we used to, or how we understand the world or the lens that we look through, that we can have this sort of negative, or it's not even necessarily a conscious negativity, but it might be the way that we speak about young people, and it comes across as potentially negative or critical, hypercritical almost. And I think it's a really beneficial thing to reframe how we talk about some of those things, because it actually enables us to see it through a more positive light, and it helps us to see the strengths that young people have, that maybe it's like we didn't actually ever see that as a strength before. One of the big examples, I think, is that young people are really like emotional, they're really like, I hear that kind of, guided by their heart, and, they don't think rationally sometimes. They're just like super emotional, which is somewhat true in what's going on in their brain chemistry and things like that, is that actually, their emotions are full on a lot of the time.
Experiencing a lot of emotions at the same time.
Yeah, which... it's like, if you can think about going back to being a teenager, it was like, that is a very overwhelming time, because there's so much happening and your brain is literally undergoing like just a rewiring, and all of the things are happening in your brain. And so you can feel, really emotional. Like, I would sometimes just come home and my mum would be like, "Are you okay?" And I'd be like, I'd cry, and she'd be like, "What's wrong?" And I'd be like, "I literally don't even know." It's just like I'm feeling a lot of...
do that if
I'm an
being
emotional
honest.
person. Yeah, well, I'm an emotional person anyway. But then it's like you sort of it's like an overboard of that, basically. But I think when we think about young people being emotional, it's like emotions aren't bad things, first of all. We can't sort of attribute value to, whether it's a good emotion or a bad emotion or whatever.
Right. I mean, we're comprised of the will, intellect, and emotion. That
Yeah.
Like... Within
Absolutely.
Catholic tradition, we say that those are the three things that make up a human person.
I think it's unreasonable to expect a young person to have a balance of that anyway. Like, it's not like...
Some adults don't even have a balance of it. So, I mean, I think it's...
Absolutely. And they're undergoing a maturing, and anyway, aside from that, it's like, just if we talk about young people being emotional, it's actually like young people are passionate. And that's what they bring. It's like they feel things deeply. Yeah. And so therefore they are passionate. They have passion and like a fervor, a vigor that is enlivening, and it's invigorating to the church. So that's like one way we can reframe that,
Yeah, we see that within church communities too, that have a vibrant youth presence, is how much life that brings to the church, and how excited and life-giving that is to even the old people in the church. And I'm like, I actually mean like the old people, like grandparents and things like. It can change an entire dynamic, which is, I think, why I'm so passionate about parishes having that in their communities, is because I've seen how life-changing that is.
Yeah. And we can hear, like, I even know, I mean, now I feel a little bit old, but like sometimes you just see young people and they're just giggling about something, you know, and you can feel almost critical of that. Like, oh, you're just being silly, or like, you know, we can just be quick to say, oh, grow up, or like, you know, stop acting like that, you know. And it's like we try to crush this response that young people can have to each other or to something that excites them or something they find funny. And it's like, actually, it's not a bad thing, you know.
That's like still the childlikeness that I think we're called to have, that Jesus calls us to have, to be childlike.
You know, and you see kids like taking off their shoes after mass and like running around laughing. And maybe teenagers don't do that as much, but I think...
Yeah, I think we'd all look at teenagers, come on, guys. Yeah. But little kids. Like,
yeah. So we can see the joy and we're like, oh my gosh, amazing. But teenagers, sometimes you're like quick to crush that. So I think that's one, you know, one example.
Yeah, I think too, there's just some negative connotations like that young people are very inward focused and narcissistic, which actually a lot of the statistics tell us otherwise. I mean, it is very hard for young people developmentally to look and see long-term decisions or to like make those connections about other people, right? But as a whole, Gen Z, for the most part, is very focused on their impact in the world and social issues, which is, I think, really great.
And psychosocial studies sort of show like that young people, you know, teenagers in their earlier and later adolescence are undergoing this sort of constructing a narrative of their life, and that's the process that they are undergoing, which is important because that's then what governs their decisions in some degree and things like that. And so it's an important ability to be self-aware. It's an important ability to look inwards and be like, what is the story that I'm creating with my life? And so at times maybe that seems really inward looking and really narcissistic. My view is the only view, but it's literally just how their brain is sort of trying to cope with figuring out their place in the world. And that takes time. And it's not always a clean, smooth sailing process.
One of the paragraphs that really struck me from Christus Vivit, which we talked about in the last episode, the Poet's Document, in paragraph 66, he says, "We adults can often be tempted to list all the problems and failings of today's young people. Perhaps some will find it praiseworthy that we seem so expert in discerning difficulties and dangers. But what would be the result of such an attitude? Greater distance, less closeness, and less mutual assistance." And I think that is really the heart of this episode, the heart of, is to kind of, there to be an understanding. So there is a collaboration, a meeting of halfway, greater dialogue. I think, and to stop trying to feel like, oh, you know, this impression that I have of young people is this, and that's how it is.
And I think it's almost this goal of building a friendship. You know, friendship is when you value what I value, then we almost have this connection immediately to then, friendship is born a lot of the time out of that, you know, and I think that that's something that we can learn from our young people is what do they value, and then how can we value what they value? And when we put importance on something that somebody else sees as vital or as important,
or even just that we can appreciate that they're passionate and value it. It's not that I have to like all the same things that, I mean, my husband, like nerdiest sports person ever, knows statistics, knows all the things. I am not that person, but I love that he's passionate about it. And I don't have to like the same things. I don't even have to be remotely interested in the same things, but I can appreciate and know that he values it. And like that can still contribute to the relationship.
Yeah. I think as we were talking about those things that we might see young people experiencing and be critical of, is like almost we see it sometimes as a phase. You know, it's like a phase that adolescents are going through or young people are going through. And it's kind of like, when will you get to the point where you're an adult, or where you...
I still don't feel like an adult.
Yeah, right. Like, what is this sort of like benchmark that we want people to get to? And it's like, actually, if we limit our mindset to it's a phase, and so we sort of write off a lot of their feelings or thoughts or experiences because it's a phase that young people go through, we are really robbing ourselves of a richness that they can bring literally as they are right now. And it's not like they have to kind of navigate that and get to this place where then finally they can contribute now because they've, you know, matured a bit more. They're more emotionally balanced or
I think that there's definitely things that I feel like there's definitely things that I feel like when I say like I don't feel like an adult, it's maybe because I have this impression that these things which are actually generational things, like that differ from generation to generation, that somehow they're just developmental cycles. And so, there's a certain realization of being like, I actually am never going to grow into looking or seeing the world the same as a Gen Y, or not Gen Y, Gen X, Gen X, or previous. Like that's because of how I've grown up and the world that I've grown up in. There are adult things that we all have to do. We all have to pay bills. We all have to, but I think that almost that imposter syndrome comes from that, and we expect that the Gen Z kids that are out there right now are going to have to grow up and be exactly like Gen X or before. And that's not the case. They're not even going to grow up and be like us, like millennials. Yeah. Well, I mean, me and millennials.
I don't think anybody even necessarily wants that, you know? Like, I think what we are aiming for as a world, or like, I don't know, it's very generalistic, but I think we speak about development and, you know, innovation, and we speak about moving forward, and we look at history and we think we don't want that to happen again. We don't want to act like that again or have these thoughts. We want to actually grow and develop and be better. And it's not to say like, oh, this generation is better than this generation, or this generation handled this better, because they've had different challenges entirely. Absolutely. And so it's actually not even really a comparison that you can make. But I think nobody actually wants every generation to be the same as the one that preceded it, because if it was, like, our world ceases to be a place where development occurs, where growth happens, where things evolve in a beautiful way. And some of those things that have evolved aren't necessarily good, or some of them might bring, you know, new challenges, absolutely. But yeah, otherwise we just become stagnant as a human race. So it's like, I don't actually think anybody wants Gen Y or Gen Zs to be like Gen Xs or Boomers or the people that have come before them. Like, we actually want them to be uniquely them.
Yes. So just to get nerdy a little bit, there's actually not heaps of research that is, or studies that are specific to New Zealand. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag of things that we have today, which we'll talk about a little bit, and why it actually might not be as important as we think it is. Anyways, so I thought that I would start, this is from, it's 7 traits, but we're only really going to talk about 4. It's by this study and this guy that studies generations and stuff. His name is David Stillman, and this is from crestline.co.nz. We'll have links for all of the studies so you can go and research yourself. But he talks about different traits of Gen Z. And he says one of the main traits is that Gen Z is very pragmatic. That's a big word for me. I had to look it up. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, what is pragmatic? Maybe you guys know what it is. Anyways, for those of you that are like me that don't, that means that to be pragmatic is dealing with things sensibly and realistically in a way that is based on the practical rather than the theoretical considerations. And I think David is specifically talking about Gen Z and the impact that it has in the workforce. So when you look up the study, that will be what it is. But I actually think this impacts us in the church a lot, and the way that, and why we, even me a little bit, walk into sometimes meetings and feel like all we've done is talk about things. Let's do something. What is a practical way that we can fix this? And I think it's important to talk about the theoretical as well as the practical, but it's easy to understand then if they're as pragmatic as social, like people who study this say that they are, why they could be so frustrating and disheartening to be on committees and things that nothing ever eventuates, and why it can feel like a waste of time.
Yeah. I mean, I just feel like you look at COP21 and all these young people protesting, basically, you know, and saying it's just another meeting of global leaders talking about climate change and nothing's going to happen. And they're like, demand action now, you know, and they're like, stop talking about it, start doing it, you know. And I think that's literally just on the global stage is just a picture for you of what it is to be a Gen Z feeling completely frustrated by lack of action that has consistently happened. And I'm not, you know, here to get into the nitty gritty of climate change because I don't know enough about it to do that. But yeah, it's, to me, that's evident is their frustration.
Yep. Another one that was quite surprising is, you know, Gen Z is our first digital natives, right? Where millennials would be considered digital pioneers. So we were there at the beginning. We kind of probably a lot of, I think, older generations that aren't so technically savvy would think that we're digital natives because we've adapted, right? But I remember when there was no internet very clearly, not just as this like misty thing, right? But Gen Z is like the first digital natives. And so we think they just want to be everything to be digital when actually studies have shown the opposite. One of the 7 traits of Gen Z is that they want to be connected. 84% would rather have face-to-face communication. And I think that is quite startling for most people.
Yeah, and that's talking specifically about with their supervisors and things, eh? Like
well, with people in general, even in other things, they've said they value face-to-face connection.
Yeah. Well, because it's so limited sometimes now.
Yep.
You know, it's like we look at this like lockdown life and what it's done to us a little bit, you know, and it's like try to run an event online after everybody's been on Zoom all day. And it's like, no, I'd actually rather just go have a cup of tea with my mum, you know, like young people are awesome, but I'd actually rather just sit with a real person in front of me and have a conversation.
We found that even in lockdown, one of the struggles that we had with our young adult community was just feeling like people didn't want to be online. And it was so how much of a response we got to having a picnic outside when we could have picnics versus trying to be like, hey guys, come join us for this Zoom session. Nobody wants to do, nobody wanted to do that.
Literally zoomed out. Like it is a thing because, I think from my own perspective, I think sometimes, I mean, you ask a young person to phone someone, that's scary. Like getting on the phone, especially like not like FaceTime, but like on the phone, calling like a stranger, even calling a friend.
I think video chatting is way like...
It's so much easier. But that's because we need facial cues, you know, like we need body language, I think, to feel assured that what we are trying to communicate is landing, it's being understood, it's being received well. You can be on the phone rolling your eyes, you know, and you don't know what the other person
Meanwhile,
is thinking.
I remember sitting for hours talking on the phone in high school. Like, just even not saying anything, just being on the phone with my friends. Yeah,
so people now would rather just send a message, text, do whatever. But like so much, send it like an Instagram DM. Like it's so much easier than... Yeah, but I think it's like when we can have that face-to-face, it highlights, I think, how much more comfortable we are to communicate with people in that way.
Another thing, that they're socially responsible. So it says 93% say that a company's impact on society affects their decision to work there more than financial, which I think is really important for us in the sense of that indicates that young people are willing to give their life and dedicate their life to something that they feel like has a purpose or will bring change. And so for us as a church, obviously, like, the gospel changes things. It changes society. It changes the world. It changes hearts. And so if we can show young people the life-changing power of the gospel, then what this is communicating is that they will give themselves of it. And actually, unlike millennials, it says that Gen Z values staying in a place for a long time. Like they don't want to change jobs. Like they want to stay with a company for a long time. And so it's probably good for work, right? Like if we can have church leaders.
Yeah.
But I think that indicates something to us that they will dedicate themselves to something for a greater purpose.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think about my experience with NET, and it's like missionaries just like from all over the world. And every year you just get blown away by like these 40, 30, however many young people giving up a year of their life to do unpaid mission. Why? Because they believe wholeheartedly in the call to share the gospel, and it is powerful to experience that year after year consistently. And sometimes I'm like, whoa, how did we find these people? And like, who would want to do this? Like, it's for free, like it's not paid.
So many people think that way.
But they're excited about it, and they're like, of course I'd give my life, and you get swept up in the the power that it is to give your life to something that you so deeply believe in.
If young people can give and dedicate themselves to the mission of reversing climate change or like all these societal issues, then like we can walk with them and journey with them in dedicating their life to the church, to Jesus. I think that's sometimes we think that's a big ask, but I actually don't think that it is.
It's like what we're saying is it needs to be evident to them that it brings positive change to society. And I think that's when we have to engage with those things. They're like, well, what is that positive change that young people want to see? And how can we make that evident that the church is working to bring that about in the lives of people? Because the truth has never changed in the church. It never will. But how people interact, like how our society is and how people interact with that has consistently changed. And it continues to do so very rapidly. And so I think it's like, how do we show young people that the church cares about that and is willing to engage with that?
The last one that I kind of thought was relevant is that, surprise, surprise, Gen Z is plugged in. The technology is in their DNA. It says 90.6 of Gen Z say that a company's technological sophistication would impact their decision to work there. While they value face-to-face communication more so than probably millennials, they still are going to look up a parish or a company or anything online, right? And that's going to be a judgment, I think, on whether they take that company, church, seriously. And I think that, I mean, I've experienced it, like going and looking, applying for jobs at parishes or looking at different parish communities to join, and seeing a very poorly put together Facebook page or website or whatnot, and being like, making an instant judgment. And whether that's right or wrong, I think that we have to be aware of that. And so it's, I think it's a balance of saying we need to be, what is it? Not coherent. What is that word I'm looking for? Apt? Maybe?
Literate?
Yes. We have to be digitally literate on social media, on all those digital avenues, but we also have to not put all of our eggs in that basket and say that that's the only way that we're going to reach young people. There has to be the face-to-face and the digital.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, it's just, that's how we reach young people with the gospel now, is online. Like, I mean, yes, in relationship, absolutely, primarily, but it's actually huge how many people I've spoken to that have encountered a ministry that they've decided to serve with, or have encountered a youth group that they decided to join, or saw an event happening, or saw something going on online, and they're like, I think I want to be a part of that.
It's an entry point.
Yeah. And it's like, that's the frontier, right? That's where gospel is being proclaimed, and people are seeing, like, I'm actually interested, and God can use it as a tool now. And we have to invest in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's the two modes sometime in the church, right? That everything that we do for young people has to be online, which I think we're seeing is obviously not 100% effective. And then there's this idea of social media and the internet is bad, and so we don't want to be on it at all, which I think is also not good, and not what the church says. The church has World Communications Day every year, and has said so many times in the past 10 years probably that social media, like, we have to proclaim the gospel in that.
Yeah.
We have to reach out to where people are. But I think what we're seeing is that just doing things digitally isn't enough for young people. They want that to be an entry point for relationship, for face-to-face communication. They don't want to just be looking at a screen all the time.
Yeah, and I think it just to be encouraged. Like, we are making strides in that with church apps and, you know, like streaming masses and things that are happening that are really are. Like, you know, they are online. And I think it's like we just got to keep investing in that and seeing it as actually like something that is so worth putting money into, hiring the right person that's going to make things look nice, you know, that's going to communicate it well.
Like, I mean, this is the nicest way to please stop using clip art.
Oh yeah, no, that just needs to be
make beautiful.
That
things.
needs to be sort of like.
And that's something that I think I've been convicted of in our youth office, is seeing social media done really well. I think the net team did a really great job. Shot to Phoebe, down in Christchurch, who did a beautiful job, and just seeing the possibility and being like, I don't even think that the youth office is using social media as well as it can be. No,
definitely. We've got a lot of room to grow, but yeah, absolutely.
Don't give up. Is what I'm saying. Find young people to help you run the social media accounts in your parish. That's a great thing. Which leads me to one of the takeaways from this article. It says that it says like businesses be ready to do this or that or whatnot. And one of the things it says businesses need to be ready to nurture talent and encourage growth and learning. The Gen Z want workplaces where the culture supports their growth and development but gives them the freedom to do things their way. And if that is not so applicable to the church right now, that we need to be fostering the charisms, the gifts that young people have, the passions that they have, and helping them to develop those within the context of the church, and giving them the freedom to do things their way and not just be in the box, in the cookie cutter shapes that we want them to be.
Yeah.
To say, hey, here's a social media account. Go crazy. Like, what do you want? You know, can we put you in some maybe like classes or free courses or whatever it is to develop that, you know?
Absolutely. I think young people are going to be drawn to that because that's what it is to be young, is to have ambition still and have this desire to grow, to be open to that. It's a beautiful gift of youthfulness, I think, is that ambition and that seeing possibilities for their own life. Absolutely. And as a young person, I can honestly say, like, I'm going to go places where I feel like my skills are recognized and my talents are harnessed. And if I'm not growing in a place, I don't want to be there because I'm too young to give up and to just be stagnant and to say, I am not appreciated here. Why would I spend time here?
And just to see like that the things that you value can actually be useful in the church. That, you know, a really easy example is that a kid who's doing singing, songwriting, plays music, that actually, like, you can lead worship. There's this whole avenue of this within the church that you can use as gifts for, or that you can write, and it can be, you know, put places, or that short stories. Like, it doesn't even have to just be for the church bulletin, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's huge. Like, I know a lot of young people that have come to faith through music, and we, you know, like there are places in the church globally that are doing that so well, like harnessing young people's talents and saying like, you've got something special here and we want to use that, and we want you to, we want you to, like, why are we playing a CD at mass when we've got a young person sitting in the pews that like can do something, you know, and we're just a bit scared of that, and maybe, or they're
because they're passionate about music is probably a turn off that there's a CD being used at mass.
So that's the thing, right? Like we do have and maybe that's hard to see in your own parish. I don't know what your experience is, but I think be encouraged that young people, they just want an opportunity and they want to be trusted to say, hey, you've got something we want to see grow in you, and like, let's use those gifts. Let's get young people up reading at mass like every weekend, you know, building confidence. That's awesome.
Some just moving from maybe that study and just kind of moving on, some similarities, two big similarities between millennials and Gen Z that I thought were quite relevant was that they both highly value authenticity. Gen Z even more so than millennials, and millennials value authenticity a lot. So I think that's really important in the way that we present ourselves as authentic. And I think I can see through when people aren't being authentic quite easily. And I think that young people have this innate ability to be able to do that.
Oh yeah, I've always maintained that young people have a great radar for fake. You know, like they're incredible. Like they can smell it a mile away. You know, like that's not real. That's fake, or that person isn't being honest. And I think I was having this conversation with you just the other day as well about like how sometimes you find people that are just real with you, like. They might be a bit older than you, but they're just real, that they're people and they're figuring it out and they just don't have it all figured out. And those are the people that I am drawn to in friendship and relationship, and not just people that are, you know, in their 20s trying to figure it out, but people in their 50s trying to figure it out, you know. And I'm like, let's be friends because you are also like on the journey. And that is beautiful to me. And I feel encouraged by that as a young person to see like, okay, I might not ever have it figured out, but it's okay. Like I can still bring a lot to the table. Like this person is a mom of 4 kids and she doesn't have it figured out yet, but she's amazing and she's rocking it. And there's a lot that I can learn from her. Yeah. And I feel, maybe in the past it's been like a you can't show weakness kind of thing in society as much. But I think now we actually want to talk about that more as young people. We really value when people are like, hey, actually this is where we're growing. This is what we're trying to work towards. Or
I think that's where for us, like learning how to share our story is really important, and sharing not just our initial conversion or a moment that we came to Jesus, but like all those little things that, hey, I was struggling with this, you know, and this is how I felt, and being real and saying, you know, I was angry with God, you know, and wrestling with those things and that authenticity, and how important it is to do that. And I know with Net, that's like one of their big things is like testimony. Yeah. And you might not think that you have a story to tell, but you do. And absolutely. How much young people value that, which we'll kind of get to in a bit. Another thing is that both millennials and Gen Z are global generations, more than earlier generations, if that makes sense. So I think because of the digital and tech kind of boom, even industry, the cultures like globalization is huge. The cultures kind of have transcended borders of places. And this is why I was earlier saying, like, it might not be as important as we think it is, that, you know, it's a young people in New Zealand or in Australia or in Puerto Rico or wherever, because one of the statistics says that 58% of those 35 and under agree that kids today have more in common with their global peers than they do with adults in their own country. And how, and like, I was taken aback by that. And I was like, actually, yeah, I kind of do feel that way. But I guess I'd never really put it into words. Yeah. I think you say that at like World Youth Day. How startling that is. Yeah. That a teenager can have, a 15-year-old now can have more in common with somebody in Belgium that is 15 than they do with an adult sitting in the same pew at a church. Yeah, because I speak the same language almost, you know. Maybe not actually speaking the same language, you know, verbally, but communicate through the same means or spend the same time doing similar things all day, you know. Globalization is huge. I think we see that, like, World Youth Day is just this huge celebration of cultures, and it's just young people getting together and being like, oh my gosh, we all love Jesus and we're all Catholic and we're all young and like actually have a lot in common despite coming from totally opposite ends of the globe. Did you feel like that rang true, like, because Net, at least while you were there, not COVID times, but had missionaries from all over the world.
Yeah.
Did you feel?
Yeah, definitely a lot of similarities. I think it's still, like, obviously, culture is big wherever you are, and I think in a Western way we can maybe Westernize culture a lot, and so Western culture is a lot in common. I think probably less so, and some of the developing countries have less in common. So I think the struggles that I have versus the struggle of a young person in Malawi is very different, but also somewhat similar, and they are, taking, like, sharing stories on WhatsApp that I was like, this is literally just Instagram for Malawians. Like, it is basically the same thing, and they all want to take photos, and they all like music, and we like, to drink a cider on a hot day after playing soccer. Like, it's still similar, but there are, obviously big differences. But I think, what we are seeing is we are facing so much the same sort of, a lot of similar challenges, and so we're having a lot of the same ways that we might cope with that or deal with that, or how we're growing up in that way. And I think big differences potentially in the ways, like, we all have similar challenges, and then sometimes societies support young people in varying degrees, and so we can see in countries where mental health of young people is just in general better, is like, well, why is that, and what is that about? And it's sort of like interesting, I think, in New Zealand, that we could learn a lot from those overseas countries that are really doing well for young people.
Some other things, some differences maybe between millennials and Gen Z that I thought were noteworthy is that millennials are actually way more public than Gen Z. That Gen Z, for instance, like on social media, Gen Z would much rather use things like Snapchat or Instagram, like, because of the time limit on it, that things are only shared for a certain bit of time. Whereas, like, I remember heaps of my friends or other millennials still within that age bracket that would just post all of their things on Twitter and Facebook and just
like
bear their
MySpace
life.
back in the
and
day.
they're probably still the same a bit now. They still use social media a bit more.
Yeah.
But just like, actually, Gen Z is a lot more private about their things and less likely to just publish their personal lives everywhere.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I wouldn't have picked that, actually, but I can see how that would be true.
Yep. I think it's that idea of you're sharing those things with the people that you're comfortable with.
Yeah. And that comes through trust. I think that's why it's so big with, more and more with young people.
Whereas
building
I think
that foundation of trust.
Some of the millennials, I mean, not necessarily me personally, but because I was raised a bit different. I was raised to be a private person, but a lot of people that I know that just share because they just want to communicate the things. They just want to vocalize it and put it out there. So I think this is quite interesting. There's another thing that I wanted to talk about, which came across, I'm in a group, if you guys have ever heard of the book, I know our team has kind of talked about it a lot, is Forming Intentional Disciples by Sherry Waddell. So there's an online Facebook group that is huge, and we get articles shared across things. And of course, I try to keep up a bit with the youth stuff that comes across. And there was an article that obviously immediately grabbed my attention, and it says 5 things that frustrate Gen Z Christians. I was like, okay, here we go. Let's buckle up. And so I just wanted to kind of share and have a discussion around these things because I think that it's really important for us. So the first one, it says, when partisan politics reshape faith. It says, in the past few years, we've grown increasingly weary of meshing politics and faith. We often see among older believers. And it's not saying that it's not that we don't value politics or government or things like that, but that it's talking specifically about this idea that because we're Catholic or Christian or whatever, we have to vote this party or that, and kind of the idealization of certain political leaders. And I think I'm not even Gen Z, and I feel that I feel like we have to, that it's frustrating to have the meshing of
Yeah.
sometimes politics and faith to the extent that they are.
I think it just got young people that are becoming increasingly politically aware from a younger age,
Yep.
and because of that are going to have disagreements with their parents about politics potentially, you know. And I remember sort of the first times when I was starting to realize that I disagree with my parents about political things,
Yep.
some political things, you know, and like it's kind of a bit disorienting when you've grown up with your parents shaping your view of the world, and so much of what you value comes from what they've taught you.
Yep.
And you've got these young people having so many different influences, and they're kind of like, I think when I feel bombarded by politics on every other aspect of my life, and like I don't want to go to church and hear about politics.
Yep. So this says, this is a young person that says, many in my generation do not wish to be identified as conservative or liberal as much as they want to be identified as Christ-like.
Wow.
And it says, this approach is sometimes considered innocent or naive, but for many Gen Z Christians, it's the most reasonable and biblical choice. And I think that just to be aware of that can be a growing point of frustration, I think. Some other ones, when apologetics outweigh relationship.
It's a big one.
Thoughts? Qualms, queries?
Oh, so many. No, yeah, I think it's huge. I think traditionally so much, you know, we've, as a church, we've grown up kind of getting catechesis, you know, we'd call it that. And I mean, if you say to a young person now, like, have you been catechized, or, you know, like probably some of them that will go right over their head. They don't even know what that means. So it's like, yes, that's something that we also need to grow in, is in our ability to teach our young people how to speak about the truths of the church, what they are first and foremost, and to raise them strong in the understanding of their faith. But you never should lead with that. That maybe never is a really strong word, but I think, success rates of like conversations I've had with people about why do you believe this or why do you believe that? It's like, I live with Protestants, and it's literally taken me quite a few months for us to have any discussion about me being a Catholic. And like, well, what do you think about Mary? You know, and it's sort of only now that we kind of are getting comfortable to actually talk about differences that we have.
Which is what the author of this says. It says, in many of my friendships with non-believers, apologetics becomes a valuable tool after relational connection is found.
Yeah.
And I think that's, 100%. Majority of the time, if I have to like come at a conversation from the point of apologetics with somebody that I have no relationship with, I'm usually not going to get anywhere. Because there's not a willingness to listen and engage. And so
you can find, like, young people can find like really good resources of people that are very well versed in apologetics online like that. They don't necessarily need that from everybody, you know, like what they actually are craving is relationship first. With people then they can trust and say, actually, I've got a concern. Can I talk to you about why do we think this?
Number 3 was when Christians don't live what they believe. Absolutely 100% seen it across not even just Gen Z, millennials, that the biggest issue. And why? Well, more often than not, I think I see people say they don't act like Jesus, and why I can be a good person without a relationship with Jesus. And so what, if I'm a better person or a more kind, loving person and don't have a relationship with Jesus or don't practice faith, and this Christian person is not a very nice person, how can God send me to hell, And there's flaws in that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I completely understand,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. Number 4, when Christians are known more for judgment than love. I think it's just that conviction of how we present ourselves to people.
Yeah, I think with younger generations, it's like there's a lot that the world is critical of, and it's like it's not shouted from the rooftops what we love about people nowadays. So much it's like what we're tearing each other down on public platforms, and
we're tearing each other down, like within the church.
Yeah, and it's I think we just have to be careful with young people. It's like how we speak around them about I mean, as Christians, we should be careful about that anyway. But it's like, especially with young people, it's like, how do we are critical of others in front of them, because I think that they're going to absorb so much of that, and they're already growing up in environments where it's tense relationally a lot of the time. And it's like, for me, I find that really jarring, is when I'm hearing people being really critical, and it's like, oh, this is full on.
Yeah, I think as an overreaction to watering things down or giving the wrong impression, we just sometimes are quick to just be like, this is what I believe, which is true and good and beautiful, but we're not very good sometimes at communicating that in love or leading with the true, good, and beautiful. If that makes sense. Number 5, when Christians aren't serious thinkers. And I think it is a growing issue, and but I think that this idea of we're so quick to share and proclaim these conspiracies and things, that it actually makes people feel like if Christians can be gimmicked by these things, then is the whole gospel a gimmick?
Yeah I think we can be, I mean, there's many conversions we can have, and I think young people at a younger age sometimes, wherever you are, just not necessarily at a younger age, for me it was, but it's like you have an emotional conversion, right? Or a sort of like an experience of Jesus' love, an experience of faith. And then as you're growing older, as you're maturing, you're having an intellectual conversion where your mind is being renewed and your mind is starting to understand truths. And for me, that's huge. A huge part of the faith for me is learning sort of the depths of the truth, and why do we believe this to this extent, and how does that impact how I view everything. And there's so much information available, we're so oversaturated with it, that we have to be critical thinkers. And young people are so aware of that, but they're so swept up sometimes, and it's like, actually we need to set an example as church that's like not critical of people, but critical of ideas, of thoughts, and we actually think about things deeply first before we make responses, because sometimes we're just reacting out of emotion. It's not
and also
good.
just like sharing the intellectual tradition of the church, that the church has been at the forefront of medicine, at the forefront of socio-economic issues, like with great thinkers, scientists, like philosophers, all of the things. Like
Writers,
there's an incredible intellectual history within the church that sometimes we aren't good at sharing.
I think it's just having a respect for people who do things to a great and high and excellent level, which we should encourage in the church continuously. We've been excellent in art and science and these things, and we want to encourage young people to keep pursuing excellence.
There's some really good questions on here that maybe we can give you to also look at and to think about as our practical. One of them is, if Gen Z is so action-oriented when it comes to sharing faith, how is your church accounting for that as an approach to evangelization? Offering and inviting Gen Z into opportunities to live out their faith in community, pursue justice, and meet tangible needs. I think that's a really great question for you to pray about, to think about, and to even talk about with people in your parish community. And where do you think there are lines between what is comfortable and what is best in faith discussions for Christian and non-Christian young people alike?
Yeah, I think that's like a really good place to, as we begin to wrap up, like, obviously this podcast isn't just like as a church that is not young necessarily, or like, if we're older, further along in the journey, that we just have to change everything for the young people. I was like, here's how their generation works, so we just have to do everything the way they want, which is never going to happen anyway, but it's not. Absolutely. It's not even our intention, but that we can see, we acknowledge, we learn about them. Like you said, we're a student of the culture. And then we're trying to encourage each other to meet halfway, sort of like we're taking what the older generations value and their experience and just their fidelity and their long-lived service to the church and the gifts they bring, and then also taking these things that young people new to the faith maybe potentially value, and how do we like blend that and mesh that, because we're not just saying like, cool, you guys have to come to us and make church work for young people. And young people, like, just kind of get over yourselves and come and join us. It's like,
which I think sometimes is the attitude. I think that's kind of been the way that we've operated, is you have to conform to, young people have to conform to maybe some of the ways that older people do things, or young people demand that old people have to work in their ways. And I think that we have to meet somewhere in the middle, because it can't be either or, right?
Absolutely.
It's just not gonna work, and that's not how we learn from each other. That we both kind of work together to do things, that we have to realize that we can't have young people conform to the ways that older people do things 100%, because that's not how it's going to function when they're the majority in the pews. It's just not. And that young people have a lot to learn from older generations as well on how to do things, and there's that beauty.
We just can't have an absolutist attitude about anything, really. And
absolutely.
It's like, that's why I think we can get overwhelmed with that when we hear all this information, or like we're listening to these podcasts and we just can feel completely overwhelmed. And that's why it's just like worked out in relationship with the Holy Spirit, that he is the wisdom, the inspiration, the direction that we need, and it's like we just, when we're working it out in our day-to-day life, in relationship with young people in our area, in our parish community, in our family life, listening to that voice of the Holy Spirit that guides us to say, actually, here's a place where I could compromise, or here's a place where I feel like I could teach this young person a very important lesson about something. And I think, we just listen to him, because like he's the one who actually knows what's going on,
Just to throw a spanner in the works and wrap us up, we'll close in prayer in a minute, but Pope Francis talks about in Christus Vivit how he's like, young people, sometimes we think we can study them and know them, and I think that's part of what we're trying to do now. But at the end of the day, that being young is not just it's like a way that somebody lives, right? And that each young person's story is different, and it's not a collective. Everybody's not the same. And so while some of these things that we're sharing are staples of certain generations of millennials, Gen Z, like each young person that you talk to is different. And I think that's the adventure of it, the adventure of getting to know and be like, wow, you're so much different than what I thought. And I think that's important. This is not like anything that we've said in this entire project. It's not a silver bullet. Everybody's different. And that's why a relationship is so important.
And the tapestry, you're a thread in a tapestry, and they're a thread in a tapestry. And
absolutely.
It makes the church beautiful. Enriches us with our diversity. Got to take it in the light of the gospel as well, and just discern it as like, well, how is this fruitful? How does this bear fruit? How does this impact my life? And it's like we can go through these studies and we can talk about all these things like young people experience or value, or the way they see the world, their lens. And we can be like, cool, that's all, that's great. But it's like, well, then what is that? How does that empower me to tailor my relationships to them in a specific way, to love them in a specific way, to uniquely, like to see how they uniquely see the world, their experiences, and what am I going to do to journey with them.
Do you want to close us in prayer?
I can.
I closed us out last time. So.
Okay, great, amazing. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Come, Holy Spirit. Lord, we thank you for the ways that you've made us unique. Thank you for the things that are good, true, and beautiful that you have made. And we thank you, Lord, that those things lead us to you. We thank you for the things that are distinct about each one of us as individuals, and our experiences, our journeys. We thank you that you love each one of us, and you've given us great gifts, great talents that we bring to wherever we are. We pray, Jesus, that you would convict us of ways that we can use the giftedness of who we are to reach out to young people, to meet them, to love them, and to see in them yourself, to see goodness in them. We thank you for all that they value and the richness that they bring. Help us, Jesus, to have your eyes to see each other, to meet one another with hearts that are open and humble. And we pray that you'd continue to help us to go on the journey together, to truly walk beside one another to learn. And if we're stumbling along that journey, we pray, Jesus, that you would renew our strength, renew our confidence in you, that you are the one who guides us. And we thank you for always, being our closest companion. We pray all these things in your most holy name.
Amen.
Awesome.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks for joining us,
See you next week.
guys.